In this dirty old part of the city where the sun refused to shine, people tell me there ain't no use in trying. Now my girl, you're so young and pretty, and one thing I know is true: you'll be dead before your time is due. I know. Watch my daddy in bed at night, watch his hair been turning gray. He's been working and slaving his life away. Oh yes, I know. He's been working so hard. Oh my, I've been working too, baby, every night and day.
Father of a correctional officer who was stabbed on the job has formed a commission to study prison reform in our state. Randy McGilberry's son has recovered from his injury sustained at St. Clair Correctional and is still working as an officer. But McGilberry is chairman of the newly formed Bettis Commission, which is named after Officer Kenneth Bettis, who was stabbed and killed at Holman Prison last year.
McGilberry. Where's that Irish? Is that
yes,
Irish?
Scottish
Yeah.
Irish.
Or Scottish. Fife. Fife is Scottish. There's actually a kingdom or a county. A county. I guess, well, actually, I think they call them kingdoms, what we call counties. I think that's how it works. One of Fife. I might be a prince.
Yes.
I
tried to trace my heritage back to that old country, and I had a brother-in-law that visited over there.
Yeah.
And he looked up the name McGilberry and McGilveray because in Alabama history there was a McGilveray.
Yeah.
He looked at them, but the McGilberry tribe, if you will, is alive and well in Scotland.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Have you ever been overseas to Great Britain? Have you got to see the homeland?
No, Exxon had a site over there and I never went to it.
Oh yeah, I would love to see that. I'd love to see the old castles.
I would too.
All that kind of stuff.
Well, Braveheart kind of aroused my interest.
Yeah. Now I do. Now that does remind me because my father had done the Ancestry.com.
Yeah.
I did it for a month because you can do like 60 days, something like that, for free. So I thought I'd try to get into it. I got to on my mother's side to the grandparents, and I gave up because there's just so many branches. Mm-hmm. But my dad did it for a while. And he said we were related to Robert the Bruce, which I know is supposed to be famous, which I think he was misinterpreted in Braveheart.
Yeah.
I think even William Wallace was misinterpreted in that movie.
Yeah.
And, but, yeah, I think we're supposed to be related to that guy, which is kind of cool. I would love to be able to go and see that. I mean, I love that old
Well,
history and
I
stuff.
even have documentation in a file at home that was given to me by a cousin. In our ancestry, we have a McGilberry that married into the Porch Creek Indian tribe, but I don't qualify for the bonuses every year.
Yeah, well,
I checked into that.
Yeah, under 25%. I think you got to be 25% or more.
Yes.
And they come get you.
And I'm not 1%.
Speaking of what we're going to talk about today with the issues going on in the Alabama Department of Corrections, I knew going into that, being my first initial B and my last name Fife, it was like 2 days into the academy, and they come in all through the back, all the instructors, and they're like, we got ourselves a Barney Fife in here. And I thought to myself, I just kept looking forward because I was like, I am not going to go through my career with that name. And I surprisingly, though, never it never became a nickname. I got other stuff.
Yeah.
Like Blue Eyes, Dimples,
Yeah.
Fake Ass Brad Pitt. That was one. Only a couple I got, because the Barney thing. Then I kind of wish I got the Barney thing better than the Dimples. That's not tough in the prison system.
No.
But did it for 8 years. 8 years and 39 days, I believe.
Wow.
And it was time to go. And,
Saw a lot, didn't you?
Saw a lot. And that's what I'm excited about today, because as you know and I know, officers are not allowed to talk. They tell us in the academy. You got, as we were talking about earlier, Jeff Williams. Now, is he the guy? Because there's a department spokesman. And
Yes.
Is that
No,
not Jeff
Horton,
Williams?
Bob Horton is the
He's still
spokesman.
around. Okay,
Yeah.
I remember that name. He's
Yeah.
still around.
Bob Horton basically put out a message that Culliver wanted him to put out, or it was something that Horton knew better than, and he said a lot of things that I'm sure that if God stood before him, he wouldn't have said it the way he said it.
Yeah.
That's what got me involved, was the way he put things.
Yeah. I think it was in 2014. It was when that Lieutenant Carter got assaulted and
Yeah.
stabbed. It was around that time that the news downplayed it, as always. The classic non-life-threatening wounds
Yes.
issues and stuff like that. And that's what kind of set me off. And I wrote like this 4-page article about the truth of St. Clair.
Yeah.
But I told it balanced. I would actually say the article was probably 60% positive, because that's another thing I'd definitely love to be able to get out and discuss today, is that the corrections officer's job is not only is it just there's a lack of respect for the job, there's a real misunderstanding of the job.
Right.
You know, when you look in the movies, it's always like the inmates in movies are always kind of like the highlight features, and officers kind of in the background, which everybody in the place is a character for sure. But it's such a unique experience, because it is just a world of its own in there. And although there is all kinds of violence and just constant stress, there is this weird side to the job where you meet individuals who have changed, and you have unique bonds and relationships, and it's just a very unique, very misunderstood job. And one of the problems is because officers are not allowed to talk, you know, and that's silly. But we can say whatever we want today.
Yeah, sure can.
Which it
I always
needs
have.
to be.
I've always said what I thought.
It needs to be. So I want you to take me back in time, because I worked day shift.
Yeah.
And you said your son still
What were
currently
you,
works
B
there.
days?
I was on B days.
Yeah.
And it's always weird to call him Seth, because since we call each other by our last name.
Yeah.
But he was on. Is he still on night shift?
He was on B nights.
Yeah. But so is he on days now?
Or was it? Yeah.
At the time,
no,
it was on
he's
nights,
straight
'cause
days now.
Because I want to say when he got assaulted, it was I was coming on the next day.
Yeah. Yeah, you were.
So take us back to the experience that you had. How long had Seth been working there? Do you know by the time that all happened? What got him to go to start working there?
I think, Jamie, Seth had kind of milled around in a few odd jobs around Mobile. He'd been hanging out with Far Fletcher, and every once in a while would sing on stage with him. Well, Seth started, Jamie, and they kind of broke up, and Jamie came back to Fayette, I believe is where he was from, and it ended up he got into corrections, and I went from seeing a little old stringy, long blonde-haired lead guitarist to a guy that was buffed up pretty good, and I mean had some meat on his bones, cleaned up, and was a corrections officer. And him and Seth would share stories, and Seth would tell me about him. And then Seth called up Jamie and said, you think I can get on? Said, go ahead and take the test and get on the registry.
Yeah.
And so
can you do a few push-ups and some sit-ups?
Right.
And run.
Seth, I mean, he hadn't been out of the Army very long. I mean, maybe a couple of years.
Yeah.
He hadn't been out very long, and so he started. He got out in 7 though, and I think he actually hired on in fall of 2015. But he went through all the testing and everything, scored very good, and Next thing I know, they called him up and basically, I don't know if they offered him that. I think it's still a practice where they come in and they do the kind of a co-op type situation where they experience the prison
You're a cadet
life.
for a while? Yeah, you're a cadet.
Before academy starts up.
Yeah.
And then I think he went to the class that started up right after the first of the year, or it was, I think it might have been even October or November of 15 when he did it.
Yeah.
So basically, he hired on. Me and him would talk every once in a while. Seth didn't call a whole lot, never has.
Yeah.
But he'd call every once in a while. So it was March the 7th, 16, and at 1:30 in the morning, about 1:20, I get a phone call, a guy with a deep voice. Hi, Mr. McGilberry, this is Lieutenant Jones. Just want to let you know that Seth's been stabbed, but he's okay and he's at UAB.
Non-life-threatening wounds.
Yeah, he never said that. Thank goodness he didn't. So I said, I went into the living room because I didn't want my wife to hear me talking from the bedside. So I got up and went in there, and immediately I said, well, how is he? And she had followed me in there, and she broke down immediately. Within 20 minutes, we were on the road to Birmingham. When I get there, we can't see my son because hospital rules, whatever. And I think Estes had been there. I never met Estes. I've never gotten a phone call from him. And he's never sent me a letter or anything expressing his sympathies for what happened or expressing any kind of regret for putting my son in that situation.
Yeah.
Never, and Dunn was there. I had gone to Seth's apartment to take care of his dog and kind of get him some clothes and stuff together. And while my wife was there, Dunn came in, and Seth had a pretty frank talk with him. Roxy stepped out, and Jeff Dunn had a pretty candid conversation with Seth. Seth laid it on the line, but Seth, out of respect, treated him cordially and everything, and didn't jump at him like, you know, how could you let this happen to me? It was more along the lines of, we've got to work together to solve these issues because officers' lives are being put in danger because we don't have enough officers to cover the mandatory areas, the post. So we get there, we're sitting there, and there was an officer that was sitting there waiting to see him just like we were. And as a matter of fact, we let him go in ahead of us. So while we're sitting there, this officer started talking to me, and I said, well, how could something like this happen? And he went, oh, you don't know, do you? And I said, no, what? And he said, you don't know about the situation at St. Clair? And I said, what situation? He said, man, we're so understaffed right now. He said, well, Seth went in and said, we had to have people leave the pod to go and assist because there was 140 guys on top of 8 guys.
Yeah.
And he said, and Mr. McGilberry, he said, Seth didn't even know he'd been stabbed. I said, okay. I said, so who's the warden? Oh, that's Estes. And I said, well, where's he at? I'm a dad and there's a mom that has a son in here because of him. Mm-hmm. And I want to know why my son's in this hospital. And I think they owe it to us to come and meet us and at least express their sympathies for what took place. Then I met another officer. And that officer told me, and if you'll bear with me, I don't put names out unless it's management at ADOC, and I'll say their name.
Yeah, all day.
But I don't talk about the officers, except to say what they told me. And I had one in the presence of my son-in-law tell me what was going on, that it was not a matter of resources at that time that Seth and them went in there. They walked into a situation where they were totally outnumbered. And said at first there were only 2 guys in there. Mm-hmm. And said then, he said, the practice is we don't bust our butt to get there. We get there in a a pretty good pace, but we try to allow them time to wear themselves down so that they're easier to subdue. I said, okay. He said, but this guy, he hadn't been there very long. He didn't know who Seth was. And he gigged blue uniforms, what he gigged. He didn't gig Seth McGilberry, he gigged an officer. And fortunately for Seth, the guy didn't know what he was doing, because he just stabbed Seth, and he stabbed down, and it was mostly muscle, but nobody knew that for sure.
Now, what started the altercation? It's been so long.
There was a fight that took place in H-Dorm.
And for those who don't know, H-Dorm is a part of the prison. It's a big open bay style. There's a clip of it in that opening roll-in where it pans. It's a big open bay, a bunch of bunk beds.
Yeah.
And there's roughly...
It's like hurricane evacuation.
I think there's 250 that are bed there, and you have 2 officers.
Yep.
Which now, especially on night shifts, for quite some time, 1 officer.
1 officer, that's correct.
250. So, but there was something going on between the inmates, I think, that... And and then him and his partner, whenever
they had already subdued the guy, and they were taking him up front. They almost had him through the door and out and gone when a chair come flying across from a guy that wasn't even supposed to be in that area. I think he was from SEG.
Yeah. From my perspective as a fellow officer, the things that attribute it to the short staff and people leaving, it goes to me back to Montgomery. It goes back even to the immediate administration.
Yes. Because
most people did not leave that job because of inmates. When I first started in 2008, it was a different atmosphere. I started under Warden Wise. You had the population had a lot of old heads in there, a lot of convicts.
Right.
And the way it was running there, where because they do run the place. Yeah. And so there was a lot more allowance towards it. And there was a lot more find in the balance. Because what's the problem, and one of the problems that we'll get into later too with Commissioner Dunn, because he didn't even have a background in
corrections. He wasn't even qualified to have the job.
And people have this idea, and that was the problem with administration, especially a lot of these paper pushers, that they feel like you go by the books, but you can't do that job by the regulations. They're guidelines, but you're dealing with a mini society. You're dealing with all kinds of individuals. Yeah. And as much as probably people generally think, and you do have some officers that treat everybody blankly, but I think they're far and few between. Most officers, because it's a life experience. That job is a life experience, and I think most officers are good at recognizing that you got all different kinds of personalities in there. You got some good inmates in there, the ones that don't belong in there, and then you got ones that on the other opposite of the spectrum, and probably even have, they're probably possessed. Like you have crazy extremes, real decent dude to somebody who's, just off the walls, evil, and all mixed into this electric fence. And but then over time, under Warden Davenport, he changed everything. Yeah. And through transfers, getting the population younger, and a lot of that in the convict leadership leaving over time, the dynamic changed. When I first started, it was unheard of an officer to get stabbed. Right. It was very rare. The only story I heard was a supervisor, but the story I knew of it, and then knowing that guy, it was one of these that he brought it upon himself. Right. He was just kind of a jerk officer, but typically it was just something that never happened. Right. And again, going back to what made officers leave, it was because, for one, pay raises. Right. It was 5 years into it till I got a merit raise. Right. Till they decided, and that was all right before Bentley's re-election. Yeah. And then they wanted to. There was rumor, I think within the year later, of them talking about freezing the raises again. Right. I think it lasted about a month, and then we were told they were going to keep them open. Right. But it only made me think, well, why would you freeze them? Okay, you're keeping them open, so you mean that you had the money. Right. So why were you going to do it in the first place? Right. When you're working the 12-hour days, which ended up taking its toll. Yeah. I started when it was still 8 hours. It was 1 month later, into being a cadet did they change it to 12.
Yeah.
Now, I liked it. A lot of the younger people liked it because of the seniority issues.
Sure.
Now you got every other weekend.
Yeah.
And at that time, though, you had over twice as many officers per shift than we
That's
had
correct.
back then.
Yeah.
So you never felt the strain.
Right.
And I also started the first 4 years on night shift. And it was, man, the first 2 or 3 years, I thought that, it really wasn't that bad of a job, especially with all the extra help.
Did you always work for the same supervisor, or did you change supervisors?
I had different lieutenants.
Yeah.
I worked under quite a few different lieutenants.
Yeah.
Throughout those years. But mostly I got along with everybody. It's a people person skill.
Right, it sure is.
And even Seth is one of those guys who's just, he was one of those typical officers who don't look to mess with anybody. He's very
Right.
laid back individuals. And officers inmates tend to know that on the general. They know
Right.
everybody's personality.
Right.
And so that's also one of those things that really showcases how out of hand things got, because typically inmates aren't going to go that route with an officer of like Seth's personality.
Right.
Generally that's the truth. But but the fact that it has gotten to that point, and the consequences have always been a joke. Because
Yeah.
I basically 6 out of 8 years was a segregation officer.
Right.
So I saw all the craziness of what we didn't lock them up for, or when we
Right.
kicked them out when they shouldn't have been kicked out.
Yeah.
What finally kicked you off then? So after the Seth incident, that you finally decided that this was something. Have you already were living the retired life and enjoying the retired life, and you said,
No.
You hadn't
I
quite
was
retired
working
yet?
full time at
Okay.
ExxonMobil in management.
so when did you finally decide this was something you were going to get passionate
Well,
about? No one cares about the DLC.
Right.
News has talked about it some, but they
Right.
get their little tidbit
Yeah.
because it's just not something that I guess gets ratings or like that.
Right.
So it gets ignored a lot. But you, unfortunately, because of what happened with Seth, something kicked off in you. So what finally decided to say this is what?
Well, I was working full time, but I'd made a commitment to the guys. I was getting close. I was going to retire at 65. But then I started getting corporate pressure to do more, because I was at an age and an income level where they started looking at, we can replace this guy with 3 guys and still save money. So Exxon can say what they wanted to say, but I saw the handwriting on the wall. And I was trying to help. I was spending a lot of my own personal money and time trying to research, going and signing up and creating a business. I got that before I even approached the guys at St. Clair. Then at St. Clair, I say that, I actually approached them before, and once I made the commitment, then I started filing the paperwork. So after that, it was in the fall of 16, I met with ACO, which is the Alabama Correctional Organization that was formed by, I think the gentleman's name was Wallace, back in the early 2000s, and they've been an organization since 06 or 07, and it was run by officers and even sergeants and lieutenants. But it was run to work in coordination with the ADOC to improve the situation and the environment. Mm-hmm. Well, the officers were paying $7 a month, and it was going into a fund, and it was, and to be honest with you, the people that were running it were looking for an opportunity to have a voice. So I set up a meeting. Somebody gave me Kristen Baez's name and Lieutenant Pierce's name, because that was the president, and I believe she was the treasurer. And there was a committee. And so I asked them to meet me in Athens, and we all met, and we presented ACOA to them as lobbyists, certified lobbyists, if you will. I mean, there's no real certification. It just the registration, the business name, and all that stuff.
Right.
Tax number and all that. So I presented it to them, and I ran into a guy named Stacy George, and they basically squelched Stacy George because he was probably one of the most outspoken officers I mean, literally in Montgomery. So then I asked them right to their face, why won't y'all let us represent y'all? Why don't you let us be the voice? Because I said ADOC does not control me. They can't tell me what I can say and what I cannot say. And I don't give a rip about who Culliver or Dunn is. I said I could care less. All I know is that the officers are being put in what I would consider to be a violation of their safety every stinking day that they go to work.
After I posted that thing on Facebook, that article, I got pulled into the warden's office the next day.
Oh, I'm sure you did.
And the funny thing was, I talked to two wardens. It was Warden Carter and Warden Evans.
Yeah.
And Miss Carter, who I knew for a while, me and her were always very cool.
Mm-hmm.
She really didn't get down with her. Now, Evans was a real company guy, and was just, I let him talk. And I knew they really couldn't do anything to me. It was, and so, but he was like, Officer Fife, now why would you say that that you work in a shithole? Why would you say you work? Like, why would you say about the place that you work? And I said I didn't say that. And I said, if you actually read the thing, then you would probably know that I actually about 60%. I think I spoke up for the place, and I said the good and the bad.
Yeah.
But I asked them too. I was like, I don't understand why we don't want people to know what goes on in these places, what we deal with.
Right.
Not even so much telling what the inmate, but like what we do, like why. And he said, well, people don't want, the public don't need to know. He told me straight out, the public don't need to know.
Right.
Well, yeah, they do.
Yeah, they do need
That's
to know.
one of the problems why we get pushed so much aside, and there's not much of an attention to it, because we're just like, nobody cares. And officers do get frustrated because we're saying like, no, we need help. For instance, around all that time, when Seth got stabbed, where they started taking they didn't want to let us go in with our own weapons, right?
Yep.
So I come in to the lobby one night when they started pushing the stuff. This was also the problem that I did have with fellow officers of guys not wanting to stick up. We had a lot more power than guys realize.
That's exactly right.
Which blows my mind. They have a lot more power. Even today, they do have a lot more voice than they realize.
Yeah.
But everybody gets scared. They want it. They always wanted somebody else, to put their neck out there. And I was one of those guys that they put their neck out there.
Yeah.
Because heck, I knew it was one of those they bark don't bite kind of things to some degree. There's some stuff I was willing to push the limit to, and heck, I came out through it just fine. Just like with the weapon thing, I come in through the scanner, and one of my supervisors who was having to, tote the party line was telling me, I had two actually. I had my collapsible and I had a wooden one. Right. And
did you have the wooden issued one?
No, this was one I had bought that I had ever since day one as a cadet, Yeah. And it was not issued, but it was regulation, And and so they asked me. Well, he said I had to put them in my car since they weren't, issued now because they were trying to issue it. I said, yeah, because the ones they were issuing out were just cheap filling, you know. And I said, you only got two choices. I said, I'm either taking this one or that one, but I'm going in there with my equipment. And he's and this supervisor, I don't want to write you. I said, I'll take the write-up, but I'm going up there with my equipment. Yeah. And again, it was one of those things, one of numerous things of unnecessary stress on the staff, stupid decision making.
Oh yeah.
And then they want to know why officers are leaving when you're not getting paid enough.
Right.
When apparently it seems that it gets passed down, you have good officers. I had one that who mentioned it to me personally the other day, where he's one of these guys who's on the night shift, and since he's one of these big guys, he's one of the go-to guys.
Yes.
And especially when you're short-staffed, and you're the constant every night rover, and you're the big guy, you're the workhorse.
Yep.
Couldn't even get a one-staff raise. That's garbage.
Right.
That's garbage. And they want to know why people are going to turn around and leave.
Yeah.
And then when Estes had his little rah-rah meetings, and and wanting to we signed up for this kind of stuff, and it always goes back to not wanting to hear our voice. I miss that. I hate that I missed the meeting. Actually, some thought it was done on purpose, but it really wasn't. It just kind of unfortunately worked out that way when Commissioner Dunn came up to St. Clair to talk.
Right.
I was looking for it all day.
Yep.
And but then I got put on a med run.
Yeah.
And that was just circumstantial.
Yeah.
But some people think like, I think they sent you out on purpose.
Right.
And I did hate it because I just was waiting. I was waiting to. Heck, I was going to ask him straight out. Like, he's here to get from our opinion, but I wanted to ask him straight out as far as what his experience was that he put on his resume to become the commissioner of DOC, that he put on there that he watched the Green Mile, because that's how do you lead something when you have no clue what you're talking about.
Right.
And again, the covering up, not being able to say stuff.
Right.
When you have him come there, or him or Culliver or something like that, clean everything up, put everybody up, make it look like it's something else.
That's exactly right.
I never understood that. I never understood that.
ExxonMobil did the same thing. They had
that's classic.
It is. It's corporations saying, here's the path we want to go on. Let's clean this up.
They do their jobs, but this is the worst place to do it.
Out of 9 years at ExxonMobil, I saw one guy that was a district manager, I guess you'd call it, but he was big wheel. He walked wherever he wanted to walk, and he walked into construction areas, and he did all kinds of stuff that got him off the beaten path, made the plant manager very nervous. He asked me questions because I was a safety manager. He asked me questions about certain things, and I answered them very open and honestly. I got my butt chewed out because my boss didn't even know what I said to him, didn't know what the questions were, and the vice president or whatever he was told me, he said, you don't discuss this with anybody, this is me and you talking. So I told my boss. He said, don't discuss it with you, and I'm not going to. Well, I got a little write-up thrown in my file. So that is commonplace amongst management.
Yeah, it is. And that's true, but that's the worst environment to do it in.
It is.
They need to see.
They do
what's
need to
going
see.
on, because then when incidents do happen, when things do pop off, you got a mini riot or something like that. What's their attitude like? Well, what's the problem over there? When we stopped by, everything was candy, Right. Well, it's because we were faking it. We should just let them know it is all over the yard and all that kind and like when I work SEG, they always go close tree holes, go close the tree. Man, they're open 24 days. Who cares, man? Let them see it's prison, man. And we're never going to get it fixed if we keep hiding everything. You take the contraband situation, for instance, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Contraband is not that hard to stop. Now, there's all kinds of and to be honest with you, to be completely honest with you, I don't think they want it to stop. I think there are certain people in position who get paid by drug dealers or the gangs to think that that happens in the white-collar world. How much more in a occupation when you're working around criminals? One of the biggest problems at St. Clair was stuff coming in through the back gate.
Yep.
Okay, because of... Actually, I had heard through one of the sergeants at training, they had busted a big container down in a Montgomery warehouse full of cell phones and stuff. And it's real simple. I know at St. Clair's facility, because all the officer does, of course, is check the outside of the truck. He can't go there. He doesn't go through every box.
Right.
And with the way the laundry's located right by the industries, short staff, all kinds of stuff, man, it's easy. Because there's no way, and I think that's where most of the problem comes in, because there's no way that most of it comes through Dirty's officers with the amount of contraband. It's physically impossible, right? So it's got to be coming through the back gate. And I want to say they even know and of course with how big the population is and gangs and all stuff like that, you can have these people easily working in all these warehouses. Sure. And I mean, that's simple. Yep. But we had, when the time was there, we had a fellow officer ask Warden Estes, because he looked into it. There's a place in Springville that trains drug dogs. Yeah. So he said he approached the warden asking, he wanted to go around and get donations from officers to have our own drug dog, because St. Clair has its own tracking dog facility, for those who don't know. Yeah. Right there on property where you could house that dog. Yeah. Right, and have somebody with him. They could put the dog at every shift change, and then during shift change, you can go down the back gate instead of the trucks, right? He said the warden told him that the state didn't want to pay the expenses on a dog or such.
What expenses?
Dog food and vet bills?
Yeah.
When you think about the amount of money that you and I pay in tax dollars based on contraband stabbings and assaults, I mean, we pay out the butt with having to send them to the free world. Right. because they stab themselves over cell phones or drugs and stuff like that.
Yes, sir, they do.
You could buy a heck load of drug dogs for what we would save by that. I mean, so they don't want to stop it. It's really not that hard to stop this stuff.
No.
You know, it really isn't. And then I had heard through, I had one of the maintenance guys actually confirm this, that I had heard through some officers, and then this maintenance guy confirmed it, that with the company that runs the wall phones, of course, they're losing money because of cell phones, right? And I was told that they had approached the state because they have the technology.
Yes.
Which is something I want to ask you about if you knew about this after I bring up this point. They had the technology of the cell phone blockers, and they said they were going to cover all the expenses, and the state wouldn't have to pay a dime because it's killing their business. And from what I was told, and the maintenance guy confirmed that state turned that down.
There was more money to be made in the cell phones.
I mean, it's the people that's up in power. Now, when I went to go talk to Claire Huddleston at Fox, when I did the undercover interview for them, and I was doing some research, because at this time too is when Governor Bentley was pushing $800 to $1.5 billion, right?
Yes, that's correct.
For 4 prisons. Now, at the time when I was trying to get all my notes together for the interview, I found an article that was just 3 years old when they had talked about raising money for some more prisons. At that time, the figure was $100 million per facility. So they just wanted, in 3 years, and they just wanted 4, how'd they go from $400 million, what it should have been, their quote, 3 years prior, to double that to even more? But then I also, through my research, and you had heard, because I tried to reach out around the time on one of the officers' Facebook pages, but nobody had an answer for it, because I had also come across where they supposedly had passed funds for 3 blockers, and we're going to put it in like in Ventress and some other place, but I never could find any information if they ever got installed or whatever happened to them. If the money, from what I got out of the article, it sounded like money was passed. Or I'll
put it like this. I don't know of any money that was appropriated, but there was a lot more money to be made in the cell phone industry than there was wall phones.
Oh, yeah.
And so the wall phone company just had to bite the bullet. And I'll put it like this. Your top, maybe your second tier management had a lot to do with that.
Well, see, that's the problem too with the DOCs, because since it's a department that's ignored a lot,
right?
And a lot of people grow up in the department, and a lot of people like Davenport and Culver, who I want to say there was an issue. Didn't an issue come up with funds regarding the uniforms?
Yes,
that they had heat on. And that kind of gone by. I know Warden Carter, who, not the one I spoke of before, but Ronald Carter's mother, who's retired, she got moved to St. Clair due to being under investigation for money laundering or some funds like that. But what they do in the department is they look out for each other. You have the few that are in power, and they do their dirty work, and it goes unnoticed because who's going to investigate the DOC? Nobody cares.
Until I stepped into the picture, I don't know of not one person other than officers themselves. I don't know of one lobbyist or anybody that stood toe-to-toe and challenged ADOC for anything. It was up to the officers, and they were fending for themselves, even though they were paying another lobbying firm in Alabama. They were paying them a monthly fee to represent them. And what that firm did is, well, they represented the teachers very well. They represented the city police very well. But when it came to ADOC, it was hands off. And that bunch was not going to challenge Culliver or anybody like Culliver. They weren't going to challenge him. So let's take a scenario here. I've got cell phones that get pitched or they get brought in by officers. I have cell phones all over St. Clair. They know every move that every officer is making. They know where every officer is at any given time because they got cell phones. They're sitting there texting each other or calling each other, however they communicate. But if Seth was a rover, they knew where Seth was. If there were two rovers, they knew where both of them were. Now, cameras have blind spots. You know it, I know it. There are a few officers that know where those blind spots are. Those are the officers that you got to watch out for because they know where the blind spots are on cameras. They also have communications where if something wants to be pitched, if I've got a tower that's not manned and I've got a fence that, I don't know, let's just say it's 100 yards long, and one officer's over here and one officer's over there, and they all know it.
All day.
All day long. And it is, if you break up the cell phone situation in a prison, there's a lot, I won't say a lot, but there are several people that stand to lose a lot of money over that. And I'm talking about people in ADOC.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So if no one is doing what I consider to be an accountability thing, like your inspector general for ADOC that was created a job. I have no idea who, I believe his last name is Fassel or Fossil. I don't know the gentleman. I can't say anything good or bad about him, but I can say that if he doesn't hold his officers accountable for, and I'm talking about captains, lieutenants, wardens, and up, if he doesn't hold them accountable for the way they handle a process, and if he can't see a line of consistency throughout reporting, and if an inmate is scared to say anything because he knows that he's going to pay dearly, and if Dunn thinks that I believe that he can stop retribution from supervision to an officer, then they're living in a dream world. And I know for a fact that Culliver barks out orders. He's got certain people that nod their head yes and go on and do the dirty work. And I don't care what anybody tells me. I have enough information to point right to Culliver and Price. They've got their own little agenda. They've got their own little political agenda. And Culliver wants to be the commissioner of ADOC so bad he can taste it.
What's his post now?
He is the Deputy Commissioner of Operations.
Okay.
Now, if I was the Deputy Commissioner of Operations and my operations had proceeded from okay to terrible in the corporate world, where would I be employed right now? I wouldn't be.
Right.
But they can't do anything to Culliver because of the bureaucratic paperwork that you got to go through to discipline somebody. And Culliver, he thinks he's untouchable, but he's not.
Right.
Culliver's not untouchable. He's untouchable because I think, number one, Dunn's afraid of the power that he has. Dunn don't really want to do the job he's doing. He probably regrets taking the job. He's overwhelmed. He didn't even meet the basic criteria of that job.
Right.
But he was given that job anyway.
Good old boy job, I guess.
But now I will tell you this. Personally, I think Dunn is a good person. I think he's a good person that's in over his stinking head.
Well, yeah, yeah.
And he's just trying to keep his nose above water level.
Now, what do you think Culliver's, he just wants to grab that top spot? Because look, I guess you can only so far with accusations there.
Right.
But I think somebody probably should be looking at paper trails.
Yes.
Follow the money.
Follow the money. Now, I will tell you
this guy
this.
in particular, because it seems they don't want to do anything. When you have talked with these guys, what's the impression they give you that they're trying to do? Because first of all right, because throw the 4 prisons out the window.
Right.
That ain't just solving the problem now. Because
No.
I know what your passion is. You're trying to get changes going on now.
Yes.
That was a money scheme.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
And a dumb
It was.
job.
It was.
Things got
Poor
done
math.
now. Obviously, one of the things was catching people up on their money and stuff like that. Things that
Yeah.
officers really want, for sure. That was the thing that started the problem.
Well, you notice how many bills have come out since re-elections about to hit us?
Uh-oh.
You got the 3% COLA. Think about that. Where'd that come from? It came from Kay Ivey. She ordained 3% COLA across the board for state employees. Now, where's that right now? Well, because there was verbiage in there about appellate judges. They were not going to be covered by it. So now there's language in there by amendment or a proposed amendment to include the appellate judges. Well, I personally don't care if they work for the state. Kay Ivey said the state gets this, but then they started writing the bill, and the bill started drawing out who gets it, who don't get it, why they get it, what amount they're going to get. Some people are going to get less than other people. And then, you know, then the politics gets into it. My biggest issue is I'm looking at bills that are coming up. We've been fighting for these bills for 2 sessions, and then the 3rd session, here comes a 3% COLA. The legislature is going to find money because a judge said thou shalt. All of a sudden, they can come up with $90 million they had in the coffers for an emergency fund. Well, okay. I want a politician to try and explain away to me why they got $90 million in there for incidentals when they've had incidentals and they hadn't done anything about it. Let's take protective vest, body armor. They issued these to every officer at all camps. Now, and I say all camps, I don't know if that was all Cat 5s, Cat 4s, I don't know, but every officer was supposedly issued a vest. I still have officers complaining because the vests don't cover them from neck to waist. They don't fit properly. The women complained because they issued unisex vests, and I turned that over to Dunn. Dunn reacted to it, and I talked to the officer, and she said everything was taken care of. Well, was that taken care of for all females in the system or just that group? Because there is a difference between a vest for a female and the unisex. And it creates a health hazard for a well-endowed woman.
Right.
And she's cooped up in a univest for 12, 16 hours.
Yeah.
That can present a health problem.
Yeah.
So that was what I pointed out to Dunn. Well, Dunn said he took care of it. Well, guess what? Dunn doesn't know that it has not been taken care of. St. Clair, of all prisons in the state of Alabama, St. Clair has the most ill and improperly fitted vest that I've known about since all this started. I tried to give Dunn kudos in the beginning, but when it started coming up and I questioned him about it, he didn't know. So what he does is he turns it over to the Cullivers of the world, to the Estes of the world, to the Bowlings of the world, and then he says, did y'all get it done? Yep, we got it done. Well, were those Army surplus vests? Did they come from a representative of a third party? Was the representative present when they were doing the fittings? Did they have vests to try on and say, yeah, this is the one that fits you the best? How did they go about it? Did prison officers actually do the fitting, and were they certified and trained by the company to do that fitting? So I have questions that Dunn has not answered yet.
Right.
And I don't expect him to, because right now Dunn's he's just biding his time.
Right.
But Culliver over operations ought to be, well, a guy like that's never going to be ashamed of himself, because all he's worried about is Culliver. Right. He's not even worried about Cheryl Price, and like I say, he's not worried about anybody but himself. And so he and his band of merry men, as I call them, all the way down through lieutenants, when you stop and look at that, how deep that goes, well, they're gonna talk down ACOA. They're gonna tell these guys, they're gonna call them into closed door meetings and say, you better not be talking about or ADOC. You better watch out for ACOA. Don't join ACOA. They talk us down. They tell us, oh, y'all have tried all that crap before. No, they haven't had anybody to stand up like I've stood up. Not because I'm doing anything and I have the credibility, but I'm not afraid to say exactly what the issues are. And I speak for the corrections officers. I don't speak for me. I don't have any credentials as far as that, but I've got just as much ability to do what I'm doing as Dunn has what he's doing.
So what kind of impression did they give you as far as them trying to work with you? What do you think their goal is? What do you think they're going to, like you said, Dunn's trying to bide his time.
Yeah.
So when it comes to fixing these things, do you think they're trying to just let the feds take over, hope that private company takes over?
Well, now there have been those that said the feds ought to take over. I've had, not politicians, I've had officers of rank tell me that.
So do you think they're wanting this to keep collapsing, hope that's the case?
If it does,
what is Culliver feeding? What kind of hot air is he feeding?
Let me tell you, well, Culliver won't talk to me. I know that I'm reaching him because I've been asked to do things within my own organization. I say mine, it's not mine, but within ACOA, because that belongs to the officers. That belongs to the people that were ACO that merged with us. It belongs to them. But when I say I mean us. And the problem that I run into is that an officer made the statement the last time the feds stepped in, we got a raise. So yeah, I want the feds to step back in. And I thought, you want the feds to step in, and I said this out loud in front of him and everybody else. I said, do you want the feds to step in? Yeah, you might get a raise, but that's impacting the taxpayers of Alabama. Plus, what other stipulations are they going to put on the ADOC that you have to meet these obligations? And the next thing you got is you got legislators looking for the money to do it. I said, the legislature's already failed y'all for 10 years. The legislature failed in the area of state mental health because one place after another, there's a timeline where things just started shutting down. Those were hundreds up to thousands of beds that were now no longer occupied by mentally ill people. So the mentally ill people, they still cause problems. So now they go in through the county incarceration, they're evaluated, but they might be convicted of theft or a felony. All of a sudden they're in the system, but they're actually one of the people that would have been taken care of had the state kept the budget that was necessary to operate the institutions they had for mental health. So now all of a sudden the ADOC goes from corrections to corrections and mental health. Well, now you have to create facilities that can meet the requirements of mental health. Well, we just had a judge within the last year say, you guys failed miserably. Your care for the mentally ill is horrendous. And thou shalt do this, 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 and this. Well, all of a sudden, and I knew this was coming. I had representatives tell me what was going to take place, especially one. He was very honest about that. I think over a course of time, we could be looking at anywhere from $50 million to $100 million that has to be invested in the mental health care as they bring it along progressively, but they'll have to bring it along, and that means hiring qualified staff. They've signed a new contract with another company, and Corizon's out. Corizon, to the best of my knowledge, it was a $20 million contract with Corizon. Now my figures might be a little off, but Corizon actually only got paid for $12 million or $13 million. I don't know what that discretionary amount was, but I'm trying to figure out, if you had a contract for $20 million, then how come you didn't get the performance, and your contract had detailed figures of what you were being charged for, the services, the medications, whatever. What is that big gap for?
Right.
Well, the judge spelled it out. You weren't caring for your mentally ill. They weren't being medicated properly, or they weren't being medicated at all, or whatever. Now, I've had several politicians try to explain that to me. Personally, I hadn't bought any of it. The ones that said it was a positive thing. You can't go from $20 million, a service contract, to $12 million and justify $12 million spent. That's not savings, that is a shortfall. So where did that other money go?
Right.
So did we pay the 20 million or did we pay the 12 million? If we paid 20 million, why did we only get 12 million of service?
Right.
So nobody's explained that very well to me. Now, they don't have to if they don't want to,
Right.
but I can keep asking the question. And what I want to do is I'm trying to inform the public. I want the public awareness of we have mismanagement of money, we have mismanagement of resources, we have mismanagement of qualifications, mismanagement of safety equipment. We have total mismanagement and chaos in ADOC right now. Mm-hmm. And I quote a upper level manager as saying that the ADOC is a lost cause.
It is.
Well, you may say that, but that person said it.
Because they, you know, when I was at the academy back in 2009, I graduated 123, and they're doing what, around 30 people now statewide?
They got 30 people in the academy right now.
And that's statewide.
Yes.
And then they're dropping out faster than you could easily fill them. Are they still doing?
You're losing 20, on the average of about 20% a year right now.
Are they still doing, you know, the little free world cubicle operators? Is that finally die?
But that's not working.
Of course it wasn't working. For those who don't know, here's one of the brilliant ideas that they decided to come up with. Get to a free world people. I think they're doing like $12 an hour, something like that.
Yeah,
2 weeks training.
No, I think it might be longer. It might be more money than that, but it's like 2 weeks of training.
2 weeks of training.
80 hours.
That not even a certified officer to run the cubicles that run the block doors, where officers got to trust, because what people don't realize, and who even made this position don't realize that a cubicle, where you've got one side of the block on the left, the other side of the block on the right here, and you have inmates that constantly come up to the tray hole window.
Yeah.
And you're like a yellow jacket in a little mason jar, because you're just in there for 12 hours, and they're just driving you nuts. And even the best seasoned officers, you know, get so worn down in the atmosphere. They want to put these people in here making less money than we do with the constant, it's stress in there. These guys constantly banging the door, or if they're females in there and they're exposing themselves. You have two things that's going to happen. Either one, they're going to turn the free world people dirty and they're going to start bringing in stuff. Yep. And then two, they're going to quit because it ain't worth it.
Right.
Dumb idea. Just a dumb idea.
Well, I've already been told that they're trying to get rid of several of the operators now because, let's just throw one common sense thing out there. Had Dakin not been on shift or in the cube that night, and I think he was clerking, had he not decided to go help, it would have been a lot worse. There would have been a lot more damage done, because I mean there was my son was stabbed and 4 others were beat down, and all 5 had to go for medical attention. Seth went for surgery, they went for medical attention. So that's 5 officers you're down, just like that. Just like that.
That's what people don't seem to realize. That's something that would frustrate us, is when they would turn these numbers in.
Yeah.
It'd be so misleading. Not only what they would quote, they're probably counting dog team and other stuff anyway.
That's right.
And probably support staff. But the reality is, I know at St. Clair, when you got 4 shifts and you're averaging 30 officers at best. Yeah. After the mandates leave, you're talking probably easily 22, 23. And
I've seen it as low as 12.
Oh my gosh.
I've seen it as low as 12.
And then you have what are called rovers. They're the ones that are allowed to go and do stuff. But there's a number of posts that you're not supposed to leave, like the cube officer or the clerk. And if you're in the kitchen officer, or if you're on duty, there's places you got to stay. If you're in the infirmary, you got to stay in the infirmary. You can't run to another part of the prison to help. So basically, on average, when you have like over 1,000 in population, you're going to have on average 2, 3, 5 guys on a good night dealing with all those people. And no one understands the terror of, like, it's one thing in here at 1017 is when inmates are fighting. Right. It's one thing when you hear 00 when an officer's involved, like that, and you're running to, you already know you're short staffed. There's been times when you run, especially when there's more and more chaos on the radio building up as you're going, and you hear the adrenaline pumping, and you're about to enter the block and turn the corner, and you only have a couple of your buddies, and you've got easily 50, 60 guys. They're all riled up. They all got knives. They all got broken broomsticks. They all got nothing to lose. And it's a terrifying experience, And at the end of the day, when you've got to somehow survive that situation, and you survive that situation People don't realize how much stress officers deal with. I didn't really notice it as much until after I left.
Yeah.
How much stress you carry on at that place.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the administration, you're nothing but a body. They don't want to pay you. They don't want to take care of you. They don't want to. There's a lack of respect, and which is weird because a lot of these people, like Culver, start off as officers.
That's exactly right.
But something's made them dirty along the way because their leadership doesn't reflect that they care.
Well, Estes don't have a choice because Estes he's in a financial bind all the time anyway.
Right. I mean, and the big key here is if they want to talk about passing money, they need to raise. That's the first key, and it's like the one thing they don't talk about: money for the officers.
Right.
And they need to up the pay because of the stress of the job. Yeah, it's not one of these kind where you've got to have a specialty or a college degree to get this kind of job. Obviously, you get a little bit of better pay if you get a college degree, but person with a GED, I guess, and as long as you can count, do some push-ups, it doesn't require the most skilled person, but in a sense it does.
Yes,
especially
it does.
People skills.
People skills is probably the most important.
Absolutely. There needs to be more. I think immediately come a couple fixes. They need to be, you need to have a little more intense training as far as weeding the people out, but to go along with that, coming out of it with better pay, so you have a better quality person that's coming in there.
Let me throw this at you. If ADOC would think about it in this way, state troopers, if corrections officers made the equivalent at grade levels as state troopers, there probably wouldn't be any guff about it.
Right.
If across the board, every step or a grade that an officer's at right now, if he received that same pay rate as a state trooper did at that level, there wouldn't be any issues with pay. But because they are lacking somewhere in the neighborhood of, could be anywhere from $6,000 to $7,000 or $8,000 a year difference in, let's just say, starting pay.
Right.
And then it graduates up the scale. When I look at what some of the supervisors make, because it's a matter of public record, anybody can go look at it. I found it, and I was only into the business for about a week, and I already knew what Jones made, officers at other camps made. I already knew that because it's a matter of public record.
Right.
So I go out and look at this, and I see officers with 8-9 years of experience, and these guys are at a pay grade where they're making $50,000, and they've been there 8 years, and they started out at probably 29, and they've only gained that much pay.
Yeah.
But that's with overtime.
Right.
That's not even just your base pay. That's with overtime. So I often look at the things that they don't want to talk about. They don't want to talk about officers or wardens that are completely inept. They're completely incompetent. In 2015, correct me if I'm wrong, but in 2015, I believe they had like a 9-warden shakeup where they just kind of threw them all over the place. Davenport went to Holman. Estes came to St. Clair. I don't forgot who all went where, but there were 8 or 9 wardens that were put in a different location. Some of them had problems with sexual harassment. Some of them had problems with abuse of inmates while they were handcuffed. Some of them were just like Estes, totally incompetent. And he came from Limestone, where he didn't have to do squat because Limestone kind of ran itself. And good people, if you've got good people under you, you don't really have to go out there and run it. You just have to manage people. And he managed it because he had good people under him. Plus, Limestone is probably the best prison in the state of Alabama as far as the way it operates, the way it controls, everything. But if you come down to St. Clair, where Estes was put, and there was a write-up in the paper, I took it straight from ADOC, that these guys had bad performances, and they were talking about wardens. They had bad performances, so we thought we would move them around and give them an opportunity to do it somewhere else. You send a guy from Limestone to the worst. They say Holman's the worst. I believe it's kind of a tight deal between Holman and St. Clair. St. Clair right now, without a shadow of a doubt, is the worst prison in the state of Alabama. And when you look at that, they send Estes, who didn't know what he was doing, to St. Clair, who still doesn't know what he's doing. He wags his head. He might be a great guy, but he comes with financial issues. He basically didn't have a choice. He had to go there. They put a guy who they say had a bad performance in a place that needs somebody that understands that he's got to be in the yard too. He can't sit in an office, and captains can't sit on their butts, and then the lieutenants sit on their butts, and the sergeants and the officers run the place. Even though that probably was the best thing for St. Clair, because y'all used to have a great group of guys.
Yeah.
Now, because of the reduction in numbers, there's still great guys there, but there's so few of them.
Oh, yeah.
And now you've got young bucks coming in who are cubicle operators into the system who, number one, they can't have any exposure to the population or SEG, but they're allowed to go to their post unescorted. Now, what does the reg say? If you're not an ADOC employee as far as A-post certified,
Right.
you're not supposed to be able to walk about that prison without being accompanied by an A-post
They
certified.
got no manpower to escort
There
them.
you go. So these guys,
Run!
Yeah, really. So I mean, you got guys that are sitting in a cube, and if worse comes to worse, if your life depended on their reaction to something, you might as well just pray to God.
Yeah, I mean, because you have, as sad as it say, and there's a lot of officers I work with that I trusted with my life for sure. You
Right.
had a certain amount, but then you had some that were dumb. You know, and you're worried about trained officers who, because of their personality or maybe not the brightest bulb, that you're going to be in a dangerous situation. Right. Much more when you've got some scared, untrained free world person.
Yep.
Who, like I said, they're in control of block doors.
Yes.
And may hit the wrong button or be scared, blue gamed into something, and the whole concept.
Well, I mean, that's
Meanwhile,
if the
they're
doors.
telling you not to bring in your equipment.
That's if the doors are locked.
Right.
You want to hear the latest? You know what Cell Buster is? Cell Buster was a spray. It was a spray that was. It basically will inundate a person. Now, I believe before that was, I don't forgot the name of Freeze P or P Freeze.
We had, when I was there, Freeze plus P was the first play.
Yeah, Freeze
and
plus
we went to
P.
Saber Red. So they don't do Saber Red anymore?
They do Saber Red, but they don't do Freeze plus P because it would literally take the oxygen. Yeah, it would mess up the airway. So I get that. But Saber is like now it's like shooting somebody with a 22 in the knee and hoping that they don't get ticked off and come kick your butt. The Cell Buster, what I understand is you could spray it out and it would inundate several people.
Area?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've been told that it will take down a pretty good area. If you spray it out there, it will take a few people down. Mm-hmm. So what they're doing now is they say that they're not going to allow the officers to carry that around with them anymore. Now, they don't have a weapon of any type except a baton, and the issued batons look like varnished broomsticks.
They're cheap. They felt cheap.
They are.
I kept my own.
I had one in my hand, and I held it, and the little rubber grip that went on it, I looked at it and I told Seth, I said, "This is what y'all use?" He said, "That's what we're issued."
And I wouldn't be surprised if they whoever's probably pocketed some money on that, on paper wrote said they ordered a higher quality baton.
Yeah.
Got those cheap jokers and pocketed them up because, they're cheap.
I would venture to say that there's been some pockets lined on equipment around there.
Yeah.
But I also understand that there's a surplus in a equipment room somewhere of various things that they won't issue. The officers that are a sergeant and above have not been issued body vest, and especially a sergeant. Sergeants should have the body vest as well.
Right.
And it should be properly fitted, because I know that sergeants, if they're doing their job, are on the yard all the time.
Right.
And I don't expect a captain to be on the yard as much, but under present conditions, I expect every person to do their duty and step up and be a part of what's going on in the prison, and not sit on their butt in an office thinking, well, I paid my dues, I'm just going to sit up here. And there are a couple of those.
For sure.
Yeah. So here again, I've got 2 inmates that broke out. They got out, and the way they got out was through a cell that had a window that had been carved out and dummied up. And the one guy that had escaped had not been there very long at all. Yet he was assigned, he was moved into that cubicle. So now let's see. 2 and 2 says, why was he moved to that cubicle, and within a couple of days or a week, he and another guy escaped from that? They basically traversed a pretty good trail across a yard, and I think, what, a couple of fences, gates?
Right.
And they had brand new cobalt bolt
Wire
cutters.
cutter, bolt cutters?
They were left at the scene. Brand new cobalt. Now, where is a inmate going to get brand new cobalt bolt cutters?
Yeah.
So where do you think that came from? Now, they carved the window out, and yet nobody knew anything about that. Yeah, how many heads were turned? Because these guys went out through a gate. I want to say it's the receiving gate. I can't.
They went out back to Sallyport.
So they went out Sallyport. Well, I also know that there was an alarm system or a trip system back there that was not working, had been reported for a long time, and they had never fixed it. And these guys went out there and cut through 2 fences, or 2 or 3 fences, but they cut through them and went through it. There was nobody in the tower. Now, do you think that there might have been some distractions? Like, do you think other inmates might have made busy work of other officers?
Well, they had one in the Sallyport Tower.
Yeah.
I know the officer was there. Now, but the other towers,
so how did
forever
the guy in Sallyport miss
now,
that?
With that, and this is, I talked to the officer, and here's what's very realistic again about the situation. Because when you're up there, in the chair that's in there, because this it's up there 40, 50 feet, it's way up there. And when you sit in the chair that's in there, even though it's a specially designed seat, and it's raised up.
Yeah.
But still, your point of view is you can't see the way it's cut off.
Probably 100 to 150 feet.
There's a good
if
bit.
You're sitting in a chair.
There's a good bit.
Yeah.
As far as if they came through, especially being dark, and if they got them blue blankets on.
That's right.
And they come through, your point of view, if you're just sitting in your chair, even if you're looking around, your point of view is cut off. Just natural concept.
Yeah.
The only way you'd fix that is an unrealistic situation of you always being outside looking around. You're going to want to take a break. Even if you weren't in a worst case scenario, because the way that the tower's designed, in the back corner is the toilet, because you got to have a toilet there. So you're even lower. Yeah. You're not going to get a relief. So it's very realistic for somebody to be able to easily miss it. And especially when they're, you talking about the cell phone thing earlier, they can just. That's right. Truck went around, go now. It's so simple. I was surprised it took so long to have somebody escape when they did. Yeah. And but there's only so much people can do, and it's funny, they're quick, blame the officer, man, it's too much of an area. The prison, I know the gates, it's a mile around the perimeter, and so you're talking about that huge town, and you want, especially on night shift, which is worse than days, and you want 2 or 3 officers to watch the yard.
So you got a situation where sometimes you have one rover, sometimes you don't always have a rover because rover might be pill call, what have you.
Right.
That rover's liable to be having to cover another post. It
Or
might be
feeding.
Yeah.
Because it's around feeding time, I think.
Yeah,
early.
it was.
So you could easily put in a situation you got 1 or 2 guys having to control everything.
Estes has made all kinds of moves. Now the latest is they're going to take this cell buster spray. They're going to keep it available. There's no rule that says they can't use it. But here's the kicker. A qualified officer has to be able to check that spray out. The spray is going to be available, but it's going to be in Central. And they're going to go, if they think they have a need for it, the qualified officer has to leave his group. He has to go up. He has to check this can of spray out. Then he has to go back to what area? It might be 10 minutes, it might be 15 minutes, it might be 5 minutes. But the fact that he has to leave a hostile situation enough that he needs that spray to go check it out, it's available, it's just not available to be on his person.
Right.
I'm trying to understand the common sense of that. That's like Barney Fife, no pun intended, but that's like that one bullet and he leaves it in the shirt that he had in the washer.
Yeah.
He goes to work with no bullets, and he reports to the scene of the incident. Well, he's got to go back to his house, get the bullet out of the other shirt, put it in the gun, and go back to the scene.
Right. They set officers up to fail. That's what they do. They set officers fails. So when we wrap this up, tell everybody what the Bettis Commission is, and what are you currently? What's the current steps right now as far as what you're working on, and what is the current state now of direction?
All right, so ACOA was developed out of a commitment to represent the officers and support staff and retirees. Well, along the way, we started finding out there was the facet that involved mental health. It involved equipment, safety, it involved pay raises, it involved legislation, and so we had all kinds of facets that for some reason or another they weren't communicating, and so they're liable to give out information that they weren't sure of about ACOA, or they were liable to give out information that they weren't sure of about mental health, and that might be a legislator. So what we did is we formed the Bettis Commission, and the reason we named it the Bettis Commission is because Officer Bettis was killed in the line of duty. That was a very preventable death, but because of the way that wardens ran their prisons, and because of the fact that they put people in harm's way a lot of the time against regulations, he was the only person in the chow hall when he was stabbed in the head, and the man died as a result of doing his job, trying to do his job. And so I attended the funeral, and I was brand new in ACOA. I actually went to the officers that were on hand up there, and I wrote it out and handed them my name, my address, and who I was, what I was. So the Bettis Commission was formed with city officials, lawyers, officers of ADOC, legislators, mental health officials at that time, and then we also had reporters there. Now, they weren't all part of the Bettis Commission, but the Bettis Commission actually was developed with law enforcement, a sheriff, a mayor, 2 representatives, and 4 corrections officers. So we formed the Bettis Commission in honor. I called his wife and I asked if I had her permission to name it after Kenneth. So we did. Now, that is a conglomeration so that we can communicate, and I post everything I post to the Bettis Commission too, because I want everybody in the Bettis Commission to be on the same page. So if they give out information, everybody can get the information and be consistent with it. That was why the Bettis Commission was formed, because there was so much talk about mental health over here, and ADOC over here, and paroles and pardons over here, and county sheriffs and stuff like that over here, and nobody's story seemed to match up. So the Bettis Commission was formed, and really, again, it was a think tank so everybody that was involved on the opposition could be on the same page.
There's a Facebook page for the Bettis Commission?
Yes, there is, but it's a closed page because there are some things discussed on there that we don't want to divulge to the public. But my posts, usually when I post on my Facebook page, Bettis Commission, and on my private association page. So everybody's reading the same thing. I don't have a private post and then all of a sudden people are asking questions over here. I let everybody see what I post because I'm trying to make the public aware. I'm trying to show the officers that we are speaking out. And and things are escalating because I know that I'm reaching done. Even though Cam Ward originally said, you know, you're just posting on Facebook. That really is not, it's not really getting out. Yet I could get Cam Ward to respond to a lot of things I did. Then I got Jeff Dunn that I thought I was going to be able to work with, and then he started making demands of what I needed to do to work with the ADOC. I flat out refused to do that. And then I know I've got Culliver looking because I understand my latest post has ticked him to no end because I speak the truth. I speak the facts about what's going on behind the scenes from people that know what's going on behind the scenes. So all I'm trying to do is be the voice for corrections officers and support staff. They've told y'all don't talk out or we'll deal with you. And so, okay, talk to me. I ain't afraid of them.
Well, we definitely appreciate, because that's what somebody has needed for a long time. Like I said earlier, it's everybody's looking for somebody else to step up. And with a lot of harassment that follows officers, of course, that's why a lot of officers never would want to speak up, even within their own camp, just afraid of lower level retaliation and stuff. It's even higher on the higher level. So it's good to have somebody who's on the outside and everything like that. Mr. McGilberry's given me the permission to, we're going to post up his email address up on the screen. If whether you know an officer or you are an officer and there's things you want to reach out to him, he'd be more than willing, whether it's locally or anywhere in the state. He'd love to hear from you if there's any way you want to help or there's information you want to give him. Or I would say even if you're out there and even if you've got family that's within the prison system, even if they're inmates, because it affects them too with how short-staffed we are. Because in all honesty, most officers, they want to go there. We don't look to beat up inmates and handcuffs and all that kind of stuff. Most of the time, the atmosphere tends to be fairly friendly. We all try to get along in there. We really do, and officers do see the individual personalities in there, regardless of how dangerous the place gets. But officers are not, the officer-inmate relationship on the general scale is not as cold as probably some portray. So the way the administration in Montgomery is handling the officers and causing short staff is also going to affect people who's got family members as inmates too. And so, you know, we also want to send out a voice to them, let them have a voice too, because there are good guys in prison. There are some guys who have changed. There are some guys that who need to go ahead and hit yellow mama, but there are some guys in there that don't need to be in there anymore, and it affects them too. So Randy, I appreciate you coming, and so hopefully, you know, all the officers and families can spread this video just to get information out there and let people know that
well, I'm on
we have an administration who doesn't want to.
I'm on a campaign. I'm trying to get guys to join up. It's $7 a month. That money is not going to be spent on my salary. I don't collect a salary. We, ACOA, does not collect a salary. All I get is my expenses. And that is trivial compared to what we hope to be able to do. I have to check with ethics to find out what we can do, but what we want to do is we want to help the Alabama corrections officers and their families when they have hard times and things like that. I just have to go about it ethically.
Right.
So I'm wanting the officers to take a hard look at this, because you're not, where are you going to get this kind of service for $7 a month?
Right.
And I spend a lot of my time, Catherine spends a lot of her time, and I have a board of advisors that are ADOC employees.
Right.
And former employees. So I'm not doing this on my own. I'm doing this at the advisement of seasoned veterans.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Help join that, because don't believe the lie that your voice doesn't matter, because I've seen it on the local scale. If you just if the officers speak up for themselves, change actually can happen. Change needs to happen desperately, because I got a lot of good guys that and female friends that still work there. I can't believe they still work there. I know. I will never walk back in those gates again. So they need all the help and support they can.
Yeah.
Randy, thank you for doing this, man.
Yes, sir.
I really appreciate this. So get out there, contact Randy if you want to help your fellow correction officer that you may know, but they definitely need your support, because it is a occupation that doesn't get the respect that it needs, and these guys definitely need our respect and our support.
Yeah.
So thanks, Randy. I appreciate it, man.
Yes,
thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much.